Andre Harrison had only $18.50 left after spending all his savings on a $1.250 plane ticket to Seattle. He had to get the director job at Kensington to pay his little girl's $24,000 tuition. But at Gate C-18 in O'Hare Airport at 11:14 p.m., a huge storm canceled every flight except his. Just then, a rich man insulted a poor old woman, Evelyn, who was begging for a ticket to save her grandchild with blood cancer. As a father, Andre could not just stand there and watch. He gave her his ticket, giving up his own life-changing chance to save a stranger. What obstacles will he face on his stormy, borrowed money trip to Seattle as he meets his old enemy? And how will the old woman's true identity change his life forever? Right after that ticket left his hand, Andre sat back down on the cold plastic bench. His fingers were still warm from her fingers. Rain hit the windows in sheets, and thunder rattled the glass every few seconds. 9 rows away, his phone buzzed with a photo of his daughter, Amara, holding a math trophy made of foil. He looked at her gap-toothed smile and felt his throat tighten. 2 months ago, he had a real office, a real title, and a real paycheck. He was the top risk analyst at Vanguard Trust Partners, the man everyone asked when a deal looked too good to be true. Then his boss asked him to sign off on numbers that did not add up. Andre refused. 3 days later, security walked him out through the lobby with a cardboard box. No other firm in Chicago would touch his name after that. The bench smelled like wet wool and stale coffee grounds. Somewhere behind him, a vending machine hummed a low electric buzz that never seemed to stop. He opened his wallet with 2 fingers, almost afraid of what he already knew was inside. One $10 bill, some coins that added up to $8.50. That was all the money he had left in the world. His stomach twisted like a wet towel being wrung out. His landlord, Mr. Diaz, had slid a yellow notice under his door 11 days ago. 3 months behind on rent, it said, with 29 days left before the locks would change. He had told Amara, right before he left, "I'm bringing home our trophy, baby girl." That trophy was a single piece of paper. It was a tuition receipt for Lincoln Park Elementary. It was the only school with a program built for kids like her. Amara could already solve equations most adults never touched. He needed that director job in Seattle by morning. Without it, that receipt would turn into a rejection letter within days. A voice crackled over the airport speakers. Every flight to Seattle tonight was grounded. Category 8 wins. No exceptions. Andre's chest caved in like someone had punched it from the inside. He stood up, so fast his knee cracked against the metal armrest. The interview at Kensington Global Holdings started at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. This was his one shot, passed along quietly by an old college friend who still believed in him. He scrolled through his contacts and called 5 people in a row. Voicemail. Voicemail. A hang-up. Rain slapped the terminal windows, so hard it sounded like gravel. He begged strangers in his head for any way out of Chicago, by road, by cargo plane, by anything with wheels or wings. His phone lit up again. A text from Marcus, the one old co-worker, still willing to answer. "Your $450 loan got denied," it read. "Your credit tanked after the firing. I'm sorry, man." Andre stared at the screen until the words blurred. Hope had lasted about 4 minutes before it died. Outside, sheets of rain poured over rows of grounded planes sitting dark and silent on the tarmac. Walking 2,000 miles was not a real option. Not tonight, not ever. His mind kept circling back to Amara's face, the one she would make when he told her he had failed. He slid down the cold wall until he was sitting on the terminal floor. For one long minute, he let himself believe it was over. A janitor's cart squeaked somewhere in the distance, and the terminal lights buzzed overhead like tired insects. Andre pressed his forehead against his knees and breathed in slow, shaky pulls of air. A soft rattling sound rolled up behind him. Andre lifted his head. A cleaning cart squeaked to a stop 3 feet away. Silas was a lean man in his 60s, with silver hair and a faded gray uniform. He handed Andre a folded towel and a cup of coffee from a dented thermos. Steam curled off the cup and mixed with the smell of floor wax and wet carpet. "I've been at gate C18 the whole shift," Silas said, his voice low and rough like gravel under boots. "Saw you hand that woman your ticket. 31 years I've worked this airport. Never once saw a man give away his whole future for a stranger." Silas lowered himself onto the bench, his knees popping like knuckles cracking. He looked out at the dark runway for a long moment before he spoke again. He said he once had a son named Elijah, a boy who loved trains more than anything else in the world. When his son got sick, Silas chose overtime pay over sitting by his bed during those last good months. He never forgave himself for that choice, and he said, so plainly, without a hint of self-pity in his voice. Then he reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a yellow plastic badge, worn smooth at the edges. Along with it came a scrap of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. "Go to Cargo Terminal 4 right now," Silas told him. "Ask for Captain Miller with Atlas Mail Freight. His 767 leaves for Seattle at 11:55 tonight. He owes me his life from our Army days. Tell him Silas sent you." Andre grabbed Silas in a hug, so tight the older man laughed and patted his back twice. He tucked the badge into his coat and sprinted through a service corridor most passengers never saw, past hissing pipes and blinking security cameras. Cold wind slammed into him the second he stepped outside onto the cargo apron. Rain soaked through his thin gray hoodie in seconds, the fabric clinging to his skin like a second layer of ice. Lightning split the sky above the runway, lighting up rows of grounded jets like sleeping giants. The smell of jet exhaust and wet concrete filled his nose with every ragged breath. He spotted Hangar 4 glowing under a row of sodium lights, rain hissing against the metal roof. Captain Miller, a broad man with a jagged scar across one cheek, was running his hand along the plane's wing, checking for ice. Thunder cracked somewhere close, and Miller barely flinched, his eyes fixed on the wing's surface. Andre held out the scrap of paper. Miller read it twice, then studied Andre's face for a long moment, rain dripping off both their chins. Something in Andre's eyes, steady and unshaken, made Miller nod once. He pointed toward a side hatch near the tail of the plane. "You've got 3 minutes before ground security does their sweep," Miller said. "Back there is the mail hold. No heat, no seat, no service of any kind. Can you handle that?" Andre climbed the narrow steel ladder, without answering, because his answer was already written on his face. The cargo hold swallowed him in darkness the moment the hatch sealed shut. Engines roared to life, and the whole plane shuddered like a living thing waking up angry. The air smelled of jet fuel, cardboard, and cold metal. Cold bit through Andre's jacket within minutes, sharper than any Chicago winter he remembered. He wrapped thick mail sacks around his arms and legs, anything to trap a little warmth against his skin. The plane climbed through the storm, rocking hard enough to slide crates across the metal floor. Every bump sent a jolt of fear through his chest, quick and sharp. He pressed his palm against a steel support beam just to feel something solid. Somewhere near 35,000 feet, the shaking finally settled into a low, steady hum. His breath came out in small white clouds, disappearing into the dark above him. He thought about Amara sleeping in her small bed back in Chicago, blanket pulled up to her chin. She had no idea her father was freezing above the clouds for her sake. A young co-pilot named Tommy climbed down to check the tied-down straps on the freight. His flashlight beam found Andre curled against a crate, shivering, one arm wrapped tight around a plastic garment bag, holding his only suit. Tommy's eyebrows lifted at the sight of a stowaway hugging a suit like it was a life raft. Tommy tossed Andre a wool crew blanket and a foil-wrapped energy bar from his own bag. "First time flying cargo?" Tommy asked, crouching down beside him. Andre nodded, teeth chattering too hard to answer right away. "You picked a rough night for it," Tommy said, checking a strap near Andre's feet. Whatever's waiting for you in Seattle better be worth it. Andre managed a tired smile and said it was worth everything he had. Then Tommy found a steel hook near the bulkhead. He hung the garment bag there, safe from the cold floor, so the suit would not wrinkle. Andre's phone buzzed once more before the cabin pressure made his ears pop. An automated email from Kensington Global Holdings reminded him his interview started at 8:45 a.m. sharp, conference room on floor 40. Right after that came a text from a number he did not recognize. It was Preston Calhoun, the rich man from the airport, the one who had mocked Evelyn only hours earlier. Even if you crawl to Seattle, you'll just dirty Kensington's floor, poor boy, it read. I already told HR about your kind. Andre's jaw locked tight, and his knuckles turned pale, gripping the edge of the crate. Heat rose up his neck, and his pulse thudded hard behind his ears. He wanted to type back a dozen sharp words. Instead, he slid the phone into his pocket and closed his eyes. Amara's face floated up behind his eyelids, steady and calm, and slowly his breathing evened out again. The plane touched down in Seattle at 8:12 in the morning, rain falling in a thin, cold mist typical of the Pacific Northwest. Andre had exactly 33 minutes to cross 15 miles into downtown. He climbed out of the cargo hold and found a cramped mail terminal restroom. He changed into his only suit there, hands shaking from cold and lack of sleep. Dark circles ringed his eyes, but his jaw stayed set, his beard freshly trimmed from the night before, his gaze sharp with purpose. Somewhere behind that tired face, a plan was already forming, one built on nothing but nerve and a $10 bill. $18.50. That was still all he had. A regular taxi wanted $45 just to reach downtown, money he simply did not have. He stepped out to the curb and flagged down a food delivery rider stopped at a red light. Andre held out his $10 bill and every loose coin in his pocket. Please, I need to reach Kensington Tower before 8:45, he said, voice cracking slightly. This is everything I have, and it decides my daughter's future. The rider glanced at Andre's crisp suit, then at his rain-soaked shoes, and silently handed over a spare helmet. Andre climbed on the back of the bike, gripping the seat rail with both hands. Wind cut across his face as the bike wove between morning traffic, engine whining under the strain. Rain stung his cheeks like tiny needles, and the smell of wet asphalt rose up from the road below. Every red light felt like it lasted an hour, and every green light felt like a small miracle. At exactly 8:43, the motorbike skidded to a stop outside a 50-story glass tower marked Kensington Global Holdings. Andre's legs felt stiff and heavy as he slid off the seat, muscles still frozen from the long night. He walked into a marble lobby full of employees in tailored suits, moving fast, phones pressed to their ears. The air inside smelled like fresh flowers and printer ink, a strange contrast to the jet fuel still clinging to his coat. His arrival, a tall black man with dark rain spots still drying on his shoulders, drew narrow, suspicious looks from the lobby security team. One guard reached for his radio, then lowered it when Andre pulled out his printed interview confirmation. He kept his shoulders back and his steps even, refusing to let their stares slow him down. Somewhere on floor 40, a man who already hated him was waiting with a coffee and a smirk. Preston Calhoun sat sprawled across a leather sofa on the 40th floor, a steaming cup balanced in one hand. The moment Andre stepped off the elevator, Preston stood, raising his voice loud enough for every candidate in the waiting area to hear. Well, look who made it. The little con artist from O'Hare, he sneered. Where'd you rent that suit? The thrift shop downstairs. We hire finance experts here, not janitors. A few candidates turned their heads. Someone near the window let out a low, awkward laugh, then quickly looked away. Andre did not raise his voice or clench his fists. He stood taller, met Preston's eyes without blinking, and spoke in a calm, even tone. I'm here for my skills in risk analysis, not to debate where my clothes came from, he said. A man's worth isn't measured by his jacket. It's measured by what he's willing to give up for someone else. The room went quiet for 3 full seconds. Preston's mouth opened, then shut again, no comeback ready. Whispers rippled through the waiting candidates like a small wave crossing still water. A soft chime rang out, and an assistant called Andre's name into the interview room. 5 senior finance executives sat waiting behind a long glass table, the smell of fresh coffee and cold air conditioning filling the space. A single ray of morning sun cut through the blinds and landed right across the empty chair meant for him. The moment Andre sat down, something in his posture shifted, calm, certain, like a man returning to work he had always known. They asked him to analyze risk on a $400 million real estate portfolio along the West Coast. Andre spotted 3 blind spots every previous report had missed. His answers landed clean and sharp, each one backed by real numbers, not guesses. By the time he finished, all 5 executives were nodding, some of them leaning forward without realizing it. For one bright moment, Andre let himself believe the worst of the night was finally behind him. He had no idea Preston was already climbing the stairs 2 floors below, folder in hand. Just as the room settled into quiet approval, the door swung open. Preston walked in, now introduced as the branch director overseeing Seattle operations. His shoes clicked hard against the marble floor, each step deliberate and loud. He dropped a folder onto the table with a loud slap. "Skill means nothing without character," he announced, straightening his jacket cuffs. "I have proof this man was fired for misconduct at his last job, and last night at O'Hare, he used threats to steal another passenger's ticket." A vein pulsed faintly at his temple. As he spoke, his voice rising with each accusation. The HR director, a sharp-eyed woman named MS. Vance turned toward Andre, with her eyebrows drawn tight, waiting for an answer he did not yet have. Whispers filled the room again, quieter this time, heavier with doubt. A man with a ruined resume and a serious accusation against him did not sound like someone worth the risk. Ms. Vance asked Andre to explain himself, but every word out of his mouth right now would sound like an excuse against Preston's carefully staged paperwork. Andre felt his pulse pound behind his ears. His mouth went dry, and his hands felt strangely heavy on the glass table in front of him. He glanced at the folder Preston had built to bury him, page after page designed to look official, airtight, and final. Somewhere outside the tall windows, a siren wailed faintly and faded away, swallowed by the sound of the city below. Andre opened his mouth to speak, unsure what words could possibly undo the damage sitting on that table. The door burst open again before Andre could speak. 2 security guards stepped inside first, followed by an older woman in a navy blue suit, a small bandage still taped to her forearm. It was Evelyn Kensington, founder and chairwoman of the entire company. Preston's face drained of color in an instant. He straightened his tie and bowed his head low. "Chairwoman Kensington, you're back early. I was just handling an unqualified candidate," he stammered, his voice suddenly thin and shaky. Evelyn raised one hand, and Preston's mouth snapped shut like a door slamming. She walked straight past him and stopped in front of Andre, her eyes warm despite the exhaustion still lining her face. Up close, Andre could see the faint smell of hospital antiseptic still clinging to her navy suit. "Thank you, Andre," she said softly. "My grandson's bone marrow surgery finished successfully at 6:30 this morning. Because of your ticket, he's alive right now." Andre's chest loosened, and warm relief spread through his arms like sunlight through cold glass. The room went completely still. Every candidate near the window stopped breathing, frozen mid-motion like statues carved from held breath. Somewhere down the hall, an air conditioner clicked on, its low hum the only sound anyone could hear. A pen rolled off the glass table and hit the carpet, and the small sound seemed to echo forever. Then Evelyn turned toward Preston, and her eyes turned to ice. She asked her assistant to pull up the large screen mounted on the wall. Grainy security footage from Gate C-18 filled the display, timestamped from the night before. It showed Preston mocking an old woman in a torn coat, then turning his contempt on the man trying to help her. Every word carried clearly through the room's speakers, sharp and unmistakable. His own words, his own sneer, captured by a camera system he had personally approved months earlier for efficiency tracking. Preston had signed that approval form himself, bragging in a company memo about tighter security across every terminal gate. He had never once imagined the very system he championed would become the evidence that ended his career. "Preston Calhoun, you are terminated, effective immediately," Evelyn said, her voice flat and final. "Every share of stock bonus owed to you is forfeited. Legal will be forwarding this footage to federal investigators for the harassment and discrimination shown here." Preston's face turned the color of old paper. His hands trembled as security guided him toward the door, his folder of lies still sitting untouched on the table. Not one person in the room said a word as he passed. Silence. Complete silence. Only the air conditioner kept humming, steady and small, filling the space where Preston's voice used to be. Once the room emptied, only Evelyn and Andre remained standing near the long glass table. She slid a signed employment contract across the surface toward him. "I wasn't just looking for the sharpest risk analyst on the West Coast," she told him. "I was looking for a leader with both skill and heart. The vice president of wealth management position belongs to you, Andre." The number on the page read $310,000 a year. Beside it sat a signing bonus of $150,000. On top of that came 0.75% in company shares. She added one more detail before he could respond. Her charitable foundation had already wired $24,000 to cover Amar's tuition for the year, with full funding promised through age 18. Andre's throat closed up, and for a moment he could not speak at all. His eyes stung, and his hand gripped the edge of the table just to stay steady on his feet. 12 hours ago, he had $18.50 and no way home. Now he had a future bigger than the one he gave away. His daughter would never have to know what it felt like to go without. Andre stepped out onto the 40th floor balcony, sunlight finally breaking through the clouds over Elliott Bay. He pulled out his phone and called Amara back in Chicago. Her voice came through first, bright and sudden, asking if he got the trophy. He laughed a short, wet sound and told her yes, baby girl, he finally got the trophy. Warm tears slid down his face as he listened to her cheering on the other end of the line. He thought back to the moment at Gate C-18, ticket in hand, choosing a stranger's life over his own plans. He never once regretted it, not for a single second, not even during the coldest hour on that cargo plane. Kindness had cost him everything he had that night. It had given him back something no salary could ever measure. Weeks later, Andre stood in his new office on the 40th floor, looking out over a city that once nearly broke him. Rain still fell most mornings, but now it looked different through clean glass, softer somehow, less like a threat. A framed photo of Amara sat on his desk. Right beside it sat a small brass keychain, the one Silas had carried for 31 years on the job. He had tracked the old man down. He mailed him a plane ticket of his own, first class, with a note that read simply, "Come see what your kindness built." Silas cried when he read it, standing right there in his cramped Chicago apartment, holding the ticket like it was made of gold. Weeks later, Silas walked into the Kensington lobby wearing a suit for the first time in years. He felt the marble floor under new shoes he had bought just for the trip. Evelyn visited the office one afternoon in early spring, her cane tapping softly against the marble floor. She sat across from Andre's desk and accepted a cup of tea, her hands steadier now than they had been that stormy night. She told Andre that Preston's case had moved forward in court, and 2 other employees had come forward with stories of their own. His name was already fading from memory inside the company walls, replaced slowly by talk of Andre's sharp instincts and steady hand under pressure. Evelyn glanced at the framed photo of Amara on his desk and smiled. "She has your eyes," she said quietly. Then she added something Andre never forgot. "Real power isn't loud," she told him. "It's the kind that shows up quietly at exactly the right moment." Andre nodded slowly, turning her words over in his mind long after she left the room. Andre often thought about that stormy night at O'Hare, the moment he handed over a ticket worth everything he had left. He never planned to be a hero. He only knew he could not watch an old woman beg for help while a rich man laughed in her face. There had been no time to weigh the cost, no spreadsheet to run the numbers on a stranger's life. That single choice, made in under 10 seconds, changed the direction of two entire families forever. Amara started at Lincoln Park Elementary that fall, her tuition paid in full, her math scores already climbing past kids twice her age. On her first day, she wore a backpack covered in tiny stars and gripped her father's hand tight at the front gate. Andre knelt down and told her the same thing his own father once told him. "Work hard, be kind, and the rest takes care of itself." Amara nodded seriously, the way only a 7-year-old solving grown-up problems can nod. She kept a small foil trophy on her desk at home, right next to a new one made of real brass, engraved with her name. When people asked her what her father did for a living, she always answered the same simple way. "He helps people," she'd say, smiling wide enough to show the gap in her front teeth. "And people help him back." Some nights, Andre still walked past a window in his new apartment and watched planes cross the dark sky toward the airport. Their lights blinked steady against the black, small and distant, like tiny promises still being kept. He thought about strangers rushing toward flights, chasing jobs, chasing family, chasing second chances they did not, yet know were coming. He thought about Silas, mopping floors at midnight, carrying more wisdom than any executive on the 40th floor. He thought about Evelyn, exhausted and soaked in the rain, invisible to everyone except the one man willing to look twice. He thought about Preston too, sometimes, and found he felt no anger left for him at all, just a quiet kind of pity for a man who never learned what he had. Kindness, Andre came to believe, was never really a sacrifice at all. It was simply the truest investment a person could ever make, paid back in ways no bank could calculate. Some people spent their whole careers chasing numbers on a screen, never once looking up to see the person standing in front of them. Andre had learned, the hard way, that the two things were never separate at all. Every rule he had ever followed about risk and reward had missed one variable. That variable was a stranger's face in the rain and the courage to actually see it. He kept that lesson framed on his office wall, right next to Amara's photo. Beside it lived the memory of a storm that once nearly cost him everything. That same storm had given him back so much more. Some nights he still thought about the exact second he handed over that ticket, 10 seconds that changed everything after it. He never once wished he could take it back.